What reconciliation means to me is that it means Indigenous people are finally getting some of the recognition we deserve in the eyes of the media and greater population. We and our politics have been so silenced and pushed back for such a long time, and it means a lot that initiatives are being taken to right the wrongs that have been dealt to us.
For me, reconciliation can mean many different things, but they all involve action, whether it be little or big. Oftentimes when reconciliation is talked about or strived towards, the missing piece is action, which is the actual act of reconciliation. We can talk about it all we want, but nothing is ever achieved without action and purpose behind that action.
There's a lot to talk about the reconciliation process. It's like so much has happened with Indigenous lives, and so much has been done to that culture. As kids or as youth or teenagers, we can spread awareness or try to make it known what happened, not cover up parts of it or make people seem like they're overreacting or anything. Just tell the truth as it was, and spreading awareness, people don't understand it's a good idea. As long as they're aware of what happened and it doesn't happen again, or it's not as people are different, aren't as ostracized and taking out humanity. It's just a matter of including everyone and understanding what happened and moving on from that.
Reconciliation to me means listening to other people's stories and where they come from, and hearing their opinions and being able to have an ongoing conversation and learning and in the hopes of healing from it.
What I can do to contribute to the reconciliation process is educate others. I think a lot of the times a big challenge with reconciliation is people not understanding or being fully educated about the history and what reconciliation really means. And when that education happens, that's when real reconciliation starts. But I think the most important part is just remembering that we're all in this together, and reconciliation doesn't have to be a long, terrible, rocky process if we work together and we use our voices.
So how I see my role as a non-Indigenous person in the reconciliation process is basically simply educating myself. I think educating myself in the past and the present of what's happening with Indigenous people is really important, as well as spreading what I've learned to other people.
To me, reconciliation means to restore all that's been lost. This includes decolonizing, uplifting Indigenous voices and institutions, and undoing all of the systemic harm caused by the colonial state.
Reconciliation is listening to me. It's listening to Indigenous peoples and, their needs and their wants.
So reconciliation to me is a lot more than just an apology or kind of a blanket statement. Those to me are kind of Band-Aid on a bullet wound. I think reconciliation is a consistent effort here on out to undo some of the damage that has been done and to really consider how much loss there can be, and to just really respect and listen to others' opinions, and not only show that you care by taking photos or posting things about it, but to really listen and to change.
I'd say educate yourselves, you know what I mean? Take a day or a few hours to understand where we come from, or why we don't stand for O Canada, why we wear orange on September 30th. It's because it's not that hard. We can do our research on French Revolution and all that stuff, but they don't bother doing it on residential schools or reconciliation. So if you guys want us to put in the effort to understand you guys, I don't think it's unfair of us to ask that you guys do the same exact research. Because honestly, Indigenous people, we can, or some people, for example, they can have it out for non-Indigenous people, same way as non-Indigenous people can have it out for Indigenous people. We just really need to educate, all of us need to educate ourselves and try to understand each other instead of trying to fight each other and always being angry. Because while residential schools and everything that happened, yeah, that was bad, but it's also a giant part of our history, and if we don't want history to repeat itself, we gotta learn to forgive sooner than later, or learn to work with each other again.
And it's not just something that we do, but it's something that we live in, you know, something like you can't just be nice once. You can't just be nice 52 times. It needs to be something that lasts and that is more perpetual.
To me, I believe it really just means that everybody living in Canada, or at least just in general, has an idea of everything that's been going on as far as the current efforts are going with a whole bunch of different parties involved, or just in general understanding where we're at or understanding what's been done in the past, I would say. I was a part of the mandatory class where we'd learn about Indigenous culture and Indigenous history, and we learn a lot about the different efforts of reconciliation, and I think it's really important to make sure that everyone has an understanding of where we're at and to understand what's really happened, basically, is what I'm trying to say.
I think we can improve the relationship between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people by starting with education and understanding. There are so many misconceptions and misunderstandings about the history of this place we now call Canada and the Indigenous cultures that lie within. There are also so many broken relationships that need mending, and this starts with the building of trust. In order to achieve these two goals, we need policy changes within the Canadian curriculum to bring Indigenous knowledge systems and scholars into the schooling system, and we also need to start bringing more representation of Indigenous peoples and nations into urban places.
I think we can improve the relationship between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people through education. Just educating people on our history and our backgrounds. I feel like there's a lot of people out there who didn't grow up learning about our culture and the history that is very important. You know, it's not just our history, it's Canadian history.
I think saying more than just being like, I know in school we do the reconciliation pledge, but I know half the students don't really listen to that or acknowledge it, or even like they don't fully understand what it means. So I think for trust with that is like we say more and we go beyond reconciliation, because you can't just say like, oh, like I participate and like that kind of stuff and like everything's done and good.
Having dialogue between Indigenous and non-Indigenous, having more cooperation and teaching non-Indigenous about, you know, our struggles, and especially in the public school system, it should be mandatory for students to learn about it. You know, to just clear the air and to clear misconception and wide range misconception. Really kind of open the minds of a lot of non-Indigenous youth. Any non-Indigenous group, doesn't matter what color they are or where they come from, should learn about who we are, because we're the original ones of this land. As long as residential schools and colonialism and, you know, broken treaties get brought up, that's all really schools need, because, you know, for the longest time our people were never understood, but now would be a great time for our people to be understood by those who aren't us.
I think a way to improve the relationship would be through meaningful conversation and education, not just through a specific program, but taking it upon yourself to learn more about other people's stories and their upbringings, and hopefully sharing your own side as well to keep that conversation going.